The exhaustion hit me like a ton of bricks, but I brushed it off. Just stress, I told myself. My life was supposed to be perfect. A beautiful home in Willow Creek, Connecticut, a successful doctor for a husband, Julian, and all the money we could ever want. But lately, even walking up the stairs felt like a marathon. My head ached constantly, a dull throb behind my eyes that no amount of ibuprofen could touch. Then there were the little things. A persistent nausea that came and went, a strange metallic taste in my mouth sometimes, and a feeling of being perpetually run down. I'd catch my reflection in the antique silver locket I always wore, and I'd see a woman who looked tired, really tired. My skin had lost its glow, and dark circles seemed permanently etched under my eyes. Julian, bless his heart, would always fuss over me. "You're working too hard, darling," he'd say, his voice smooth as silk. "You need to relax. Let me take care of you." He'd bring me tea, special blends he'd mixed himself, claiming they were for my nerves. They tasted, and sometimes, earthy almost, but I figured it was just his way of being a good husband. I dismissed the aches and pains as the price of a busy life. We threw lavish parties at the Vance estate, and Julian's medical practice at Sterling City Medical Center demanded a lot of his time, which meant I often handled the social calendar and the endless upkeep of the mansion. It was a lot, sure, but I was Eleanor Vance. I could handle it. I just needed to get more sleep, eat better, maybe take a vacation. That's what I told myself anyway. But deep down, a tiny nagging voice whispered that something was wrong. Something more than just being tired. It was a feeling I couldn't quite shake, a shadow lurking just at the edge of my awareness. The autumn air in Willow Creek had a crisp bite to it, a welcome change from the suffocating heat of summer. I found myself at the Old Mill Diner, a place I usually avoided, preferring the hushed elegance of our own dining room at the Vance estate. But today, the familiar ache behind my eyes was particularly fierce, and the thought of Julian's perfectly curated meals felt heavy. I needed something simple, something normal. Cup of coffee, black, and maybe a slice of their apple pie. The diner was mostly empty, just a couple of truckers nursing mugs at the counter, and a woman tucked away in a booth by the window. She looked familiar, though I couldn't place her. As I slid into a booth across from her, she glanced up, her eyes widening slightly. "Eleanor Vance?" she asked, her voice a little raspy. I offered a polite smile. "Yes, that's me." "Wow," she breathed, looking me up and down. I used to be a patient of your husband's, Julian Vance." My heart gave a little flutter, not of alarm, but of mild surprise. Julian had a lot of patients. "Oh, really? Interesting." She fiddled with the sugar packets on the table. "Yeah. I saw him for about 6 months, maybe a year ago. For chronic fatigue. He was great at first, really listened. Said he had some special treatments, you know? Herbal stuff, vitamins, things like that." I nodded, taking a sip of my coffee. It was bitter, just how I liked it. "He's very dedicated to his patients." "He was," she agreed, her brow furrowing slightly. "But after a while I started feeling weird. Worse, almost. More tired but also jumpy. My heart would race for no reason. And I had this awful metallic taste in my mouth all the time. Like I'd been chewing on pennies. A chill, unrelated to the autumn air, snaked down my spine. Metallic taste. Jumpy. My own symptoms, though I'd chalked them up to stress. But this woman. She sounded so much like me. Did you mention it to him?" I asked, my voice carefully neutral. She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Of course. He just said it was part of the healing process. That my body was detoxing. He upped the doses of whatever he was giving me. Said it was all natural, perfectly safe." She shook her head, a troubled look on her face. I finally got fed up and switched doctors. The new guy ran some tests, found nothing specific, but he took me off Julian's regimen. And slowly, I started feeling more like myself again. The fatigue eased up, the racing heart stopped. That took the longest to go away. She trailed off, staring into her own coffee cup. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken questions. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the lingering shadows of what she'd described. The slight tremor in her hands, the weariness in her eyes. It mirrored my own reflection, the one I saw in my antique silver locket. That sounds difficult, I managed, my throat feeling tight. It was, she said, finally meeting my gaze. I always felt like something was off, you know? Like he wasn't telling me the whole story. But what could I do? He's a doctor. Highly respected. She sighed, pushing her cup away. Anyway, it's nice to see you looking, well, you always seemed so put together. Thank you, I said, though the compliment felt hollow. Put together. I felt like I was unraveling thread by thread. She gathered her purse. Well, I should get going. Good seeing you, Eleanor. You too, I replied, watching her walk out, the bell above the door giving a cheerful little jingle that felt completely out of place. I sat there for a long time, the half-eaten pie forgotten. The diner suddenly felt too bright, too loud. That metallic taste. The fatigue. The inexplicable aches. Julian's special teas, his nerve blends. He'd always been so reassuring, so caring. Just stress, darling, he'd say, his voice like velvet. Let me take care of you. But the woman's words echoed in my mind, a discordant note in the symphony of my seemingly perfect life. A tiny seed of doubt, planted by a stranger in a diner, began to sprout in the barren soil of my denial. It was just a coincidence, I told myself. Had to be. But the unease, once sparked, refused to be extinguished. It flickered, a small, persistent flame, casting long shadows on the edges of my awareness. The diner's bell had barely stopped its cheerful jingle before a heavy quiet settled back in. That woman's words, though. They were like tiny burrs sticking to my thoughts, impossible to shake off. Julian. His special teas. The metallic taste. It was too much of a coincidence. My perfectly ordered world felt like it was starting to fray at the edges, and I didn't like it one bit. I paid for my untouched pie and coffee, the taste of betrayal already souring my mouth. Driving back to the Vance estate felt different. The familiar manicured lawns and the imposing stone facade, usually a symbol of security and success, now felt like the walls of a very fancy prison. Julian was out, probably at his practice, doing what he did best. Charming people, making them feel better, while I felt worse. Back in our bedroom, the scent of Julian's expensive cologne lingered, a scent that suddenly felt cloying, suffocating. I walked over to his dresser, my heart thumping a nervous rhythm against my ribs. He kept a few things there, personal items. Among them, a small, sleek leather-bound journal. He used it for, well, I wasn't entirely sure. Notes on patients, maybe. Or personal thoughts. I'd never snooped before, but the unease from the diner had morphed into a cold, hard resolve. I needed answers, and I needed them now. My hands trembled slightly as I lifted the journal. It wasn't locked. Flipping through the pages, I saw neat, precise handwriting. Medical notes, appointment reminders, a few scribbled thoughts about a difficult case. Nothing immediately incriminating. But then, tucked away in the back, I found a section with dates that matched the last few years. And under each date, a list of ingredients. Not just names but quantities. And some of the names, they were obscure. Things I'd never heard of, mixed with common vitamins and minerals. My breath hitched. One particular entry, dated just a few weeks ago, listed something called belladonna extract, in a small but significant amount. And arsenic trioxide, even less. My stomach churned. This wasn't a nerve blend. This wasn't for my nerves. This was poison. Slow, calculated poison. The realization hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. 3 years. He'd been doing this for 3 years. I carefully closed the journal, putting it back exactly where I'd found it. My mind was racing, 1,000 thoughts colliding. Panic warred with a chilling calm. I couldn't let him know I knew. Not yet. He was a doctor, smart, manipulative. If he suspected I was onto him, he'd change his methods, be more careful. I had to play dumb, keep up the act of the oblivious, stressed wife. But I also had to act. I needed proof, undeniable proof that a court of law, or at least a jury of public opinion, would believe. Julian was meticulous, but even the most careful people made mistakes. I needed to find one. That night, after Julian had finally drifted off to sleep, his breathing deep and even, I crept out of bed. The house was silent, the moonlight casting long, eerie shadows across the polished floors. I tiptoed to the guest bathroom, the one Julian rarely used. In the cabinet, I found a sterile, disposable lancet and a small, sealed vial. Julian kept a medical kit there for emergencies, though I'd never seen him use it. My hand shook as I pricked my finger. A tiny bead of blood welled up. It looked so normal, so innocent. I squeezed it carefully into the vial, filling it just enough. This was it. My first real move. I sealed the vial tightly, my heart pounding a frantic drum solo against my ribs. The next morning, before Julian left for his practice, I told him I was going into Sterling City for some shopping. He kissed me goodbye, his lips cool against my cheek, and I had to fight the urge to recoil. I drove not to any of the upscale boutiques, but to a discreet lab on the other side of town, a place I'd found online, known for its privacy and thoroughness. I need a comprehensive blood panel, I told the technician, my voice steady, though my insides felt like a tangled mess of nerves. And, could you test for any trace elements? Anything unusual? I've been feeling. I didn't mention Julian or the diner or the journal, just a vague sense of unwellness. The technician, a kind-faced woman named Brenda, nodded sympathetically. Of course. We'll run everything. You'll have the results within 48 hours. As I walked out of the lab, the vial of my own blood clutched tightly in my purse. A new kind of resolve settled over me. This was just the beginning. I was Eleanor Vance, and I would not be a victim. I would find the truth, and I would make him pay. The game had begun. The next 2 days crawled by. I kept up the charade, forcing smiles, discussing Julian's latest golf scores, pretending to be the same oblivious Eleanor. But inside, a storm was brewing. Every time Julian touched me, I flinched internally, imagining his hands, the hands that held mine so tenderly, were the same hands that measured out poison. The Vance estate felt less like a home and more like a gilded cage, the walls closing in, suffocating me with their silence and their secrets. I'd never been one for dramatics, never the type to make a scene. My strength was quiet, a deep-seated resilience I'd always taken for granted. Now it was being tested like never before. Finally the call came. Brenda, the technician from the lab, her voice calm and professional, cut through the nervous haze that had settled over me. "Mrs. Vance," she began, and I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. "We've got your results back." My breath hitched. I was standing in the sunroom, the late afternoon light filtering through the glass, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It felt like a scene from a movie, a cliché, but my reality was anything but. "And," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. There was a slight pause, and I could almost feel her sifting through the data. "Well, everything looks pretty normal for the most part. Standard blood count, kidney function, all within normal ranges." A small wave of relief, quickly followed by disappointment, washed over me. Was I imagining it all? Was it just stress, just my mind playing tricks? "But," Brenda continued, and my focus snapped back, "there was something unusual. A trace amount of a substance. It's quite rare, and it acts very slowly." She spelled it out for me, a name I'd never heard before, something that sounded like it belonged in an old apothecary shop, not in my bloodstream. "It's called," she said, "a form of arsenic. Very low levels, but definitely present. It's not something you'd typically find in a healthy person's system. And it's known to cause symptoms like chronic fatigue, neurological issues. Things you mentioned." My knees went weak. I sank onto a nearby wicker chair, the phone still pressed to my ear, though I was barely listening anymore. Arsenic, slow-acting, the metallic taste, the fatigue, the racing heart. It all clicked into place with a sickening finality. This wasn't stress.
This was my imagination. This was Julian. My husband. The man he loved, the man he built a life with, was deliberately poisoning me. The thought was so monstrous, so alien, it took a moment to fully register. Had been doing this for years, slowly, subtly, while with the known divisor, blaming myself for my declining health. The sheer audacity, the calculated cruelty of it, was staggering. Misters Vance, are you still there? Brenda's voice pulled me back. Yes, Croake, my throat suddenly dry. Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Brenda. I've been incredibly helpful. I forced myself to sound calm, to maintain the facade. I could not let her, or Anione, know the depth of what this man. This was my secret now, my burden to carry, and my weapon to forge. We can provide you with a more detailed report, if you like, she offered. No, I said, my mind already racing ahead. This is enough for now. Thank you again. I hung up the phone, my hand trembling. The sun Huon, once a place of quiet contemplation, now felt charged with a sinister energy. The sunlight, which had seemed so warm and inviting moments before, now felt harsh, exposing the ugliness beneath the surface. I looked at my hands, the hands that had held Julius, that had prepared his meals, that had accepted his kisses. They felt tainted, so meu. The vial of blood, still clutched in my purse, felt heavy. A tiny vessel holding the truth that would shatter my world. I was just a victim anymore. I was a woman who knew. And Knovin changed everything. The fear was still there, a cold knot in my stomach. But it was now mixed with something else. A fierce, burning resolve. He thought he was in control, playing a long game. But he had no idea the game had just changed. He had no idea I was playing to win. The drive back to the Vance state felt like a descent into a gilded tomb. The arsenic confirmation, Brenda's calm voice shone in my ears, had shattered the last vestiges of my DNA. It was just a feeling anymore. It was a fact. Julian, my Julian, was systematically poisoning me. The thought was a cold, hard knot in my gut. But panic vowed to help. Cream vowed to help. I needed a plan. And that plan started with observation. Back in the sterile key of our bedroom, the scent of his cologne, once a comfort, now felt like a cloying trap. I watched him, really watched him, for the first time a long time. He was preparing his usual evening tea, a blend resvori by for his nerves. He always used the same chipped ceramic mug, the one with the faded picture of a lighthouse. He measured out the loose leaves from a small, unmarked tin recap in the pantry. A tin he never paid much attention to before. Now, my eyes were glued to his every movement. He had a pin of this, a dash of that, his hands steady, his expression serene. Was that where it was? In the pantry. Or was it in the water? The refrigerator? Every mundane act suddenly felt loaded with sinister possibility. I started keeping a mental log, then a physical one. A small, unassuming notebook, tucked away in my bedside drawer. My days became a delicate dance of playing the part of this legal very stressed wife while my mind was a whirlwind of calculations. I note down Julian's schedule with painstaking detail. His early morning rounds at the Sterling City Medical Center, his afternoon appointment, his late night reading in his study. Every deviation, every slick change, was lodged. He mentioned a new pattern, a difficult case, and described down the name he casually dropped at dinner. Who knew what connections might emerge? Then there were my medications. The ones he prescribed for my anxiety and fatigue. I'd always taken them without question. Now, I'd examine the prescription pill bottles, noting the dates, the dosages. Sometimes, I'd find them legal out of place, the caps not scribed on kit ticked enough, or a pill or two missing that he had to take. I started feigning forgetfulness, asking him if he'd see my bottle, making him re-explain the dosage. Each time, he'd patiently, lovingly, guide me, his touch gently, his voice soothing. It was a performance that made my stomach sure. Food preparation became a mine field. Ide always enjoyed cooking, but now, every ingredient felt suspect. He started watching Julia more closely when he was in the kitchen. Did he ever add anything to my plate that was too on his? Did he prepare my meal separately, or was it all mixed together? I noticed he started insisting on making my morning coffee himself. A small gesture I found sweet. Now, it felt like a deliberate act. I watched him grind the bench, pour the water, his back to me. Was he adding something then? A powder? A liquid? I could not got the risk tasting it. Not yet. Not until we had a way to test it. I also began to pay closer attention to the small things he consumed. His own tails, his supplements. He kept separate stacks of vitamins and powders in a locked cabinet in his study. Something I never questioned. Now, I wondered what was in there. Was he protecting himself? Or was it part of the elaborate deception? I knew I needed more than just suspicion. I needed concrete proof. Something undeniable. This meticulous documentation, this constant vigilance, was my shield, my weapon, my first line of defense. I was building a case, brick by painstaking brick, in the key confines of my ungilded cage. Each entry in my notebook was a step away from victimhood and a step closer to justice. The game was on, and I was playing to win. The drive from Willow Creek to Greenwich Village felt like an escape. A breath of fresh air after being trapped in a stuffy, suffocating room. The city was a different world, a chaotic symphony of honking taxis and hurried footsteps. A stark contrast to the suffocating silence of the Vance State. I called Sarah from the car, my voice a little shaky, and she immediately told me to come over, to her place. She'd always been my rock, my straight shooter since we were kids trading secrets in trailhouses. Now, I needed her more than ever. Her apartment was exactly how I remembered it. A cozy, cluttered mess of books, files, and the fine smell of coffee. Sarah, with her sharp eyes and even sharper mind, greeted me with a hug that felt like coming home. She could tell something was seriously wrong, even before I said a word. Ellie, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost. I took a deep breath. The city is still buzzing in my lungs. Vorse. Sarah. I think I've been living with one. I sat down on her couch, the spring is growing a little, and then I told her everything. I started with the fatigue, the verdashes, the feeling that something was fundamentally off. I told her about the blind test, the trace of poison Brenda had found. His smile tightened for a fraction of a second. A flicker of something I could not take it decipher. Was it surprise? Annoyance? Or was it the subtle satisfaction of a predator watching his prey waking? Perhaps you're coming down with something, he said, his tone soothing. I'll make sure your evening dose is extra strong tonight. It should help you sleep. He was so sure of himself, so confident in his control. He saw my perceived weakness as a sign that his plan was working, that he was fading away just as he intended. He didn't see the steel beneath the surface, the key fury that was lovely but surely hardening into resolve. After dinner, he excused himself to take a call in his study. The moment the door clicked shut, I was on my feet. I moved quickly, silently, to the small table in the hallway where he often left his briefcase. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I opened it, my eyes scanning the contents. Nothing obvious. But then, tucked beneath a stack of medical journals, I saw it, a small, unmarked vial. My breath itched. I didn't dare touch it, but memorized its shape, its size. Another piece of the puzzle. I closed the briefcase, making sure everything was exactly as I found it. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of the bed, the shard of glass cool in my palm. I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. He thought he was whining. He thought he was oblivious. But he was wrong. Every subtle manipulation, every feigned weakness, every piece of evidence gathered was another step towards his undoing. The game was far from over, and Julian Vance had no idea just how badly he underestimated his wife. The night was long, but for the first time in years, it felt like it was finally awake. The air in the Vance estate felt thick, almost suffocating, but it wasn't just the usual silence anymore. It was a silence charged with my own plans, a que of anticipation. Julian thought he had me. He saw the fatigue, the slick tremor in my hands, the way they started picking at my food. He thought he was whining, that it was just a wilting flower he could control. Good. Let him think that. It was all part of the show. I spent the last few days observing him like a hawk. His routines were predictable, almost boringly so. The morning coffee, the way he always checked his watch before adding to his practice, the late night calls he took in his study, his voice hushed. Sarah had been feeding me information too, little nuggets about his professional life that, when pieced together, painted a picture far uglier than I imagine. It wasn't just me. He'd been doing this for years. That thought, as chilling as it was, also fueled my resolve. My plan started small, with something he'd never suspect. It involved his precious schedule. I knew he had a standing lunch meeting every Thursday at the old mill dinner with a few of his colleagues. It was always the same buffet, the same team. This Thursday, however, would be different. I'd already made my move earlier that week. While he was out, I'd slipped into his study, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I didn't touch his personal things, nothing that would raise an alarm. Instead, I focused on the small, discreet box he kept on his desk, the one he sometimes fiddled with when he was stressed. It held a few spare, expensive pens. I'd carefully swapped out one of his favorite Montblanc pens for a nearly identical, but Sligel e Avier, replica I'd ordered online. The real one, the one that might have his fingerprints and trace evidence, was now safely tucked away. The day of the lunch meeting, I made sure to appear particularly frail. Julian, darling, I decided, my voice viac. I don't think I can manage dinner tonight. This dash is just relentless. He smiled, a sug, satisfied look in his eyes. Of course, my dear. You rest. I'll be back late. Don't wait up. As soon as he left, I was in motion. I grabbed the real Montblanc pen from its hiding place. My hands were steady now, fueled by a cold, hard anger. I walked over to the small side table in the living room, the one with the decorative dish. I picked up the tiny shard of glass I'd found earlier and, with surgical precision, pressed it into the intricate etching on the pen's barrel. It was almost invisible, a tiny imperfection only you would know about. Then, I made a call. I knew he'd be at the dinner for at least an hour. I told the person on the other end to expect a package, something important, and to deliver it directly to his office, marked urgent. It was a long shot, a carefully placed seed of doubt. Later that evening, Julian was in his study, engrossed in his work. I sat in the living room, pretending to read, but my ears were tuned to every sound. I knew he'd be back in his office soon, probably checking his mail, his messages. He was meticulous, a creature of a bee. And a bit, he was learning, where the easiest things to exploit. He thought he was in control, but he was just a pawn in a game he didn't even know he was playing. The pieces were on the board, and he was just waiting for him to make his next move. The next few days were a tightrope walk. Julian was oblivious. His sugnis a constant irritant. He'd come home, kiss my forehead, ask about my day with that practiced concert, and the play the part, the viac, fading wife. It was exhausting, but necessary. Every fake sig, every dove cast a glance, was a brick in the wall he was building around him. Sarah and had been working non-stop, piecing together the puzzle. The toxin, the timeline, the sheer audacity of it all. It was more than just poisoning. It was a slow, deliberate erasure. The plan for the planted evidence needed to be perfect. It had to be something Julian would find himself, something that would nudge him in the direction he wanted him to go, without him ever suspecting it was my doing. I'd been thinking about his office, the place where he felt most in control, most himself. It was a sterile, organized space, much like the man himself. But even he had his little quirks, his habits. He did always keep a small stack of personal files on his desk, usually related to his more sensitive cases. This past Tuesday, while Julian was at his practice, it made my move. The Vance state was quiet. The staff gone for the afternoon. Slipped into his study, the article with the sentence of letter and dispensive cologne. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against my ribs, but my hands were steady. It didn't touch anything significant, nothing that would scream tampering. Instead, I went straight for that stack of files. Buried deep within, it carefully placed a single, folded piece of paper. It wasn't just any paper. It was a page torn from a cheap, spiral-bound notebook, the kind you'd find in any drugstore. On it, it scrawled a few words in a shaky, almost illegible hand, mimicking and writing it practiced in secret for weeks. The words themselves were vague, hinting at a clandestine meeting, a hushed conversation about experimental treatments and discreet handling. It even smoothed its legal with a bit of dirt broken from the garden, making it look old and forgotten. The real genius of it, though, was the ink. It used a specific type of fountain pen ink, one that Sarah had identified as being particularly difficult to trace back to a common source, but one that Julian himself favored for his personal notes. It was a subtly detail, one that would plant a seed of doubt in his mind. Reduce the handwriting, the vague message, and the familiar ink, and his own paranoia, his own guilt, would do the rest. He start to connect dots that weren't there, to imagine a rival, a threat, someone else who knew his secrets. It left the studies quietly as it entered. The evidence now a ticking time bomb. Julian was a creature of a bee, and knew he'd find it. He'd bedraw to it, like a moth to a flame. His own mind the fuel for the fire. He'd see it as a sign that someone was on to him, that his carefully constructed world was starting to crumble. He would to suspect me, of course. Why would he? He was the fragile wife, the one he was so expertly dismantling. He was so confident in his control, so sure of his victory. He had no idea that the game had already shifted, that the hunter had become the hunted. I watched him that evening, his every move scrutinized, waiting for the first flicker of unease. It was only a matter of time. Julian was practically humming as he got ready for his first lunch. He always looked forward to those meetings, a little break from the grind, a chance to feel important. He'd even picked out one of his favorite teas, a sharp nave with subtly silver trees. He thought he was so smooth, so in charge. He had no idea how right he was about the humming, but it was from happiness. It was the sound of a trapdoor cracking open beneath his feet. I watched him from the doorway of his study, my face a mask of practiced frailty. My head throbbed, a douche de learned to live with, a constant reminder of his betrayal. He caught my eye and gave me that practiced, condescending smile. Morning, darling. You're up early. Feeling any better? Just a bit lit, my voice raspy. Don't worry about me. You go enjoy your lunch. Even managed a Viac wave. He probably saw it as proof of my fading spirit, my inability to even keep up with his busy schedule. Perfect. As soon as the Avioc door of the Vance state closed behind him, the act dropped. The violins vanished, replaced by a sharp, cold focus. The house felt eerily quiet without Julian's booming presence, but it was a welcome silence. It was the sound of opportunity. I moved quickly, my step silent on the Persian rugs. My target was the Julian's office this time. It was something far more personal, something he'd overlooked in his arrogance. I went to the small, seldom used guest bedroom on the second floor. It was mostly storage now, filled with forgotten furniture and boxes of old linens. Tucked away in the back of the closet, beneath a stack of moth-eaten blankets, was a small, locked wooden chest. It had been a gift from his grandmother, filled with old family mementos. Redeshon it to me once, years ago, when he was trying to impress me with his family history. I de remembered the intricate, old-fashioned lock. I had Sarah's contact for a locksmith. Not just any locksmith, but one who offered her a favor, a guy who understood discretion. He had been to the state earlier in the week, under the guise of fixing a leak faucet in the west wing. While he was there, he had made a quick detour to this room. He had picked the lock with practiced ease, then he locked it, leaving no trace. He had also discreetly taken a small, almost unnoticeable impression of the case unique cut. Now, I retrieved the exact replica of Julian's stud key, the one I had made based on that impression. My hands didn't shake as I inserted it into the lock. It turned with a soft click. Inside, nestled amongst faded photographs and yellowed letters, was a small, letterbound journal. It was the one I'd seen used before. This one was older, tucked away and forgotten. It was his. I opened it. My heart pounding as she had, determined hidden. The pages were filled with his precise, elegant handwriting. It was filled with personal photos or daily reflections. No, this journal was a ledger of his experiments. Dates, dosages, patinames, orhater, initials, and chillingly detailed notes on their reactions. And there, buried within the entries from about 3 years ago, was my name. Not Eleanor Vance, but I.V. Followed by notations about gradual introduction subtly symptomology and tolerance assessment. Had been documenting his poisoning of me from the very beginning. But the real price was just the confirmation. It was the detail about the CPC compound he was using, a hair derivative of a common pharmaceutical, listed with its chemical composition. Had been so confident, so meticulous in his planning, that he had documented his own crime in excruciating detail, believing it would never be found. He thought he was in control, playing God with my life. He never considered that his own arrogance, his need to document his supposed genius, would be his undoing. I closed the journal, a green satisfaction settling over me. Julian, my darling Julian, you just handed me the hope. Now, it was time to tie the knot. The letterbound journal felt heavy in my hands, a tangible piece of Julian's sick game. I took it away safely, the proof needed, the weapon I'd been forging in secret. The house was quiet, the silence a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. I knew Julian would be back for a while, but the gnawing unease, the constant vigilance, never truly left. It was in those quiet moments, though, that the real work happened. The planning, the fine-tuning. Sarah and I had been exchanging coded messages, our digital whispers feline in this suffocating darkness. She was a force of nature, her sharp mind and unwavering loyalty a constant source of strength. She'd been working on her end, digging, always digging. And this time, her digging had hit something solid. He's got a name, Eleanor. Sarah's voice crackled through the secure line. Ushed but electric. Detective Miller. He's sniffing around. Someone tipped him off. My heart gave a little jump. A mix of fear and fierce anticipation. This was it. The first domino. Who? I whispered back. My own voice barely audible. Anonymous. Of course. But the details. They were specific enough to get his attention. He's a good cop, Eleanor. Old school. Doesn't like things that don't add up. That was Sarah's doing, I knew it. She'd found a way to feed information, just enough to pique his interest, without revealing too much, without pointing directly at me. She was a master of her craft. And it was her most important project. What kind of things? I asked, my mind racing. He's looking into Julian's practice. Some irregularities. Petty complaints that were brushed under the rug. Financial records that don't keep balance. The usual stuff that makes a detective's ears perk up. But it's more than that, Eleanor. He's got a gut feeling. He told me, Frua, that Julian Vance gives him the creeps. A slow smile spread across my face. Julian, the picture of cow, collected professionalism, giving a seasoned detective the crepes. It was almost funny. Almost. So, Miller is investigating Julian now. E confirmed. Needing to hear it out loud. He's starting. Just a preliminary look, but he's good. Really see the cracks if they there. Sarah's been feeding him little breadcrumbs. Just enough to keep him looking in the right direction. He's got a nose for this kind of thing. He doesn't believe in coincidences, and Julian's life is practically built on them. This was exactly what we needed. An outside force, a legitimate authority, to start applying pressure. Julian was too smart, too careful, to be caught by me alone. He did twist it, deny it, play the victim. But a detective had the power to subpoena, to question, to uncover the buried hot. He's asking about Julian's professional reputation, his recent cases, Sarah continued. Her voice dropping even lower. He's also looking into the Vance estate, asking about staff turnover. Anything unusual. I closed my eyes, picturing Detective Miller. 50 years old, probably seen it all. Revolved to be easily fooled by Julian's charm or his expensive suits. He'd be looking for the truth, the unvarnished, ugly truth. And had made sure he'd find it. The journal, the carefully planted evidence in Julian's office, the subtle hints Sarah had been dropping. It was all a symphony of exposure, and Detective Miller was about to conduct the orchestra. Good, he said, my voice stirred, betraying none of the adrenaline coursing through me. Keep him federação. But keep it anonymous. Keep it deniable. We can't let Julian know it's coming from us, not yet. That's the plan, Sarah assured me. He's got no idea. He thinks he's got you exactly where he wants you. Fragile, dependent, fading away. He's so damn arrogant, Eleanor. It's going to be his downfall. I agreed, a cold certainty settling in my gut. Julian Vance, the master manipulator, the brilliant doctor, the loving husband, was about to discover that he'd been playing with fire. And was the one holding the match. The game was far from over, but the tide was turning. Detective Miller was on the scent, and Julian's carefully constructed world was about to start crumbling, brick by brick. The air in Detective Miller's cramped office felt thick, heavy with unspoken accusations and the stale scenting of coffee. It was a world away from the polished veneer of the Vance estate, a welcome dose of gritty reality. Sarah sat beside me, her usual vibrant energy dialed down to a focused intensity. She'd arranged this meeting, a carefully orchestrated maneuver that felt both terrifying and exhilarating. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a drumbeat of anticipation. Detective Miller, a main voice face CM thatched with years of dealing with the worst of people, sat behind his cluttered desk. He looked tired, but his eyes, sharp and observant, missed nothing. He'd been digging, just like Sarah said. He'd been asking questions, sniffing around the edges of Julian's perfect life. And now, we were laying it all out for him. Thank you for saying us, Detective said, my voice a little shaky, but forced it to sound stirred. I kept my gaze locked on his, trying to convey the gravity of what we were about to reveal. He'd heard it all before, I was sure, but this was different. This was a meticulously planned crime, not a crime of passion. Sarah slid a thick manila folder across the desk. It landed with a soft thud, a stark contrast to the silent poison Julian had been administering for years. Detective, she began, her voice clear and firm. We have evidence that proves Dr. Julian Vance has been systematically poisoning his wife, Eleanor, for the past 3 years. Miller's eyebrows shot up, but he didn't dismiss it. He'd been fed enough breadcrumbs by Sarah to be intrigued, if not entirely convinced. He picked up the folder, his fingers tracing the war edges. Poisoning. That's a pretty serious accusation, Mestre. Jenkins. We know, he said, my voice gaining strengthening. And we have the proof. It's all in there. I gestured towards the folder. Julian kept meticulous records. He was so arrogant, so char he never becauged, he documented everything. Miller opened the folder, his eye scanning the documents. Sarah had helped me organize everything perfectly. The journal, the one Julian thought was safely hidden, was the centerpiece. We managed to get it, and Sarah's tech skills had digitized every page, cross-referencing dates and substances. We had printouts of Julian's own notes, detailing dosages, my symptoms, and his twisted assessments of my tolerance. It was chilling, to say the least. This is his handwriting, Miller murmured, flipping through the pages. He stopped at a specific entry. His brow furrowed. His noting gradual introduction here, and subtly symptomology. And this chemical compound. He looked up at me, his gaze intense. Is this what you've been suffering from, Eleanor? He nodded, a single, decisive movement. Yes. He was so careful, so precise. He used a derivative of a common medication, something that would be hard to detect without knowing exactly what to look for. He thought he was a genius. My voice cracked legal, the years of pretending, of enduring, finally catching up to me. Sarah chimed in, and we've corroborated the toxin. Independent lab reports, based on samples Eleanor discreetly provided over the last year. They match the compound Julian documented. She pulled out another set of papers, lab reports with official letterheads. This confirmed the presence of the substance in Eleanor's system, in concentrations that allied with his journal entries. Miller leaned back in his chair, the initial skepticism in his eyes replaced by a deafening realization, a grim understanding. He looked from Sarah to me, then back to the evidence. The sheer volume of it, the detail, the undeniable connection between Julian's documented actions and Eleanor's suffering. It was overwhelming. He documented your poisoning. In a journal. Miller asked. The words laced with disbelief. He documented his experiments. He corrected. The word tasting like ash in my mouth. He saw me as a lab rat. He was so proud of his intellect, his ability to control everything. He never imagined the BD want to expose him. He met his gaze directly. He's been trying to kill me, detective. Slowly, deliberately, for 3 years. The weight of my words, coupled with the irrefutable evidence spread across his desk, seemed to settle over the room. Detective Miller was a good cop. He saw the truth when it was laid bare. And here it was, in black and white, a confession written by the very man who had tried to erase me. The trap was sprung. The air in the grand foyer of the Vance State felt heavy, charged with unspoken tension that had been building for years. It was late, the kind of late where the silence outside was so deep you could almost hear the crickets' teeny conversations. I settled in the middle of the joyride floor, the cool, smooth surface doing nothing to call the frantic beat of my heart. Julian walked in, his usual confidence tried falterings legal when he saw me standing there, bathed in the dim glow of the chandelier. He had just returned from some late night consult, his doctor's bag slung over his shoulder, a practiced smile already forming on his lips. Eleanor, what are you doing up so late, darling? He asked, his voice smooth as silk, but his eyes, those sharp, calculating eyes, flickered with an of surprise, then suspicion. He had expected me to be waiting. He had expected me to be anywhere but in bed, vacant and compliant. I didn't move, didn't flee. The years of pretending, of playing the victim, had turned my composure into something sharp and unyielding. Just thinking, Julia, he replied, my voice calm, almost too calm. It was a performance, one I rehearsed a thousand times in my mind. He tossed his keys onto the antique mahogany console table, declared showing the vast space. Thinking. About what, my love? You look pale. Are you feeling all rigged? He moved towards me, his hand reaching out, a gesture that used to feel like comfort but now felt like a predator's approach. He took a step back, breaking the unspoken rule of his domestic theater. I'm feeling indignant. Julian. The word hung in the air, a tiny, sharp shard. His hand froze immediate. The practiced smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of unease. Enlightened. What are you talking about, Eleanor? I'm talking about the truth, he said. My gaze locked on his. The truth you've worked so hard to bury. The truth you thought was too weak, too foolish, to ever uncover. His face tightened. The charm evaporated, revealing the cold, hard calculation beneath. I don't know what games you're playing, Eleanor. You've been unwell. You're not thinking clearly. Oh, I'm thinking clearer than 11 years, Julian coultered. My voice gaining a settle edge. Thanks to Detective Miller. And Sarah. The mention of those names visibly rattled him. His eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. Miller. Sarah. What do they have to do with anything? Everything, he said, stepping forward, closing the distance between us. I could feel his apprehension radiating off him, a palpable wave. They have everything to do with the fact that your little experiment is over. He scoffed, a forced, brittle sound. Experiment. Eleanor. You're being dramatic. You're sick, and you're lashing out.
Ei!
I raised my hand, ending it, I held a small, clear vial. It was matte. Just a few drops of a colorless liquid. This is the same substance you've been slipping into my drinks, my food, for 3 years, isn't it? The same substance that's been slowly killing me. His eyes widened, a flash of pure panic before he masked it with anger. That's insane. Where did you get that? Oh, Julian, I said, knowing a smile touching my lips. You are so proud of your meticulous notes, weren't you? So sure no one would ever find your little journal. You documented every dose, every symptom, every twisted thought. You even kept samples, didn't you? For your research. I watched his face drying off color, his carefully constructed wood crumbling around him. Detective Miller has them. All of them. Along with the lab report Sarah arranged, confirming the toxin in my system, matching it to your documentation. He took a step back, his breathing growing ragged. You went behind my back. You betrayed me. Betrayed you. I logged, a harsh, broken sound. You've been poisoning me for 3 years, Julian. You watched me get sicker, viaker, and you did nothing but document it. You enjoyed it, didn't you? The power. The control. The God complex. I took another step closer, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. But you underestimated me. You always did. You saw a fragile woman, a victim. You never saw the woman who learned to fight back. The woman who planned. The woman who waited. He looked around frantically, as if searching for an escape, for a way to twist this, to manipulate his way out. But there was nowhere to run. The house, his sanctuary, had become my stage. It's over, Julian said, my voice firm and clear. The game is up. You thought you were the one pulling the strings, but you are just a pawn in mine. He held up the vial again, a symbol of his own undoing. You wanted me gone. Well, congratulations. You've made sure of it. Just not in the way you intended. The confrontation was raw, visceral, the culmination of years of silent suffering and meticulous planning. They are crackled with the finality of it all. The air in the Sterling City Courthouse felt cold, sterile, a stark contrast to the suffocating heat of the Vance State. It had been a few weeks since that night. A blur of police interviews, legal consultations with Mr. Henderson, and Sarah's unwavering support. Now, it was time. The weight of everything, the 3 years of slow poison, the calculated cruelty, the near-death experiences, pressed down on me, but beneath it, a settle resolve had taken root. Julian sat across from me, a ghost of his former self. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, unted look. His expensive suit looked rumpled. His usually perfect hairs legal disheveled. He avoided my gaze, staring instead at the polished wood of the defense table as if it held the secrets to his escape. Had been arrested that night. Right after our confrontation. Detective Miller, bless his methodical soul, had been thorough. The evidence we provided, the journal, the lab reports, my testimony, it was all there, a damning indictment of his supposed brilliance. Mr. Henderson, my Lavier, a man who spoke with the key authority of someone who does it all, so to beside me. Had been instrumental in navigating the labyrinth of the legal system. His called me anora matinee de anchor. Sarah sat in the gallery, a silent, fierce presence, rara as locked on Julian. A silent promise of justice in their depths. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Mestre Davis, began her opening statement. Her voice, clear and unwavering, cut through the hushed courtroom. She laid out the facts with a chilling precision, painting a picture of Julian's meticulous, long-term plan to murder me. She spoke of his medical knowledge, twisted and weaponized, of his desire for control, for freedom from a marriage he clearly resented. She detailed the slow poisoning, the symptoms he endured, and how he, with the help of Sarah and Detective Miller, had uncovered his monstrous shame. Julian flinched with each word. His face a mask of disbelief and deafening horror. Had been so sure of his own cleverness, so convinced he was untouchable. Had underestimated me, underestimated Sarah, and most importantly, had underestimated the law. As the trial progressed, witness after witness took the stand. Doctors testified about my unexplained ailments, corroborating the effects of the toxin. Sarah presented her investigative findings, detailing how Julian had sourced the chemical and how had manipulated my medications. Detective Miller recounted the arrest and the discovery of Julian's hidden notes, the chilling documentation of his crimes. My turn came. Standing before the judge and jury, he recounted the past 3 years. It was easy. Reliving the constant fatigue, the nausea, the fear that had gnawed at me for so long, was like ripping open old wounds. But spoke with a key strength. My voice steadied. He described the moment he realized the truth, the slow dawning of understanding that my husband, the man he loved, was trying to kill me. He spoke of the fear, but more importantly, he spoke of the resolve that had grown within me, the determination to survive and see justice done. He looked directly at Julian, not with hatred, but with a profound sadness for the man he had become, and a fierce pride in the woman he had become. The defense tried to paint me as delusional, as unstable, a product of my illness. They broke up Julian's reputation, his respected position in the medical community. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The journal entries, Julian's own words detailing his methodical poisoning, were undeniable. The lab reports, confirming the presence of the toxin in my system, matched perfectly with his documented dosages. Finally, the jury deliberated. The hours that followed were agonizing. I sat with Mr. Henderson and Sarah, the silence punctuated only by the ticking of the large clock on the courtroom wall. Julian sat alone, his shoulders slumped, his wood shrinking with every passing minute. Then, the jury returned. The courtroom held its breath. The foreman shouted, his voice clear as he read the verdict. Guilty. On all counts. A collective sigh swept through the room. Julian's face crumpled. The carefully constructed facade shattered, revealing the broken, disparate membrane. He was led away, his once powerful stride replaced by a defeated shuffle. As he walked out of the Sterling City Courthouse, the sunlight felt brighter, the air cleaner. It was a celebration, not exactly. There was no joy in seeing a man broke low, even one who had tried to destroy me. But there was a profound sense of peace. The weight they carried for so long had finally lifted. My wound, once poisoned and suffocating, was now my own, free and clear. The fight had been long and brutal, but he had survived. He had won. That's it. If you like this video, share it with your friends and leave your like. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss more videos like this. Leave your comment in my main code saying what you thought of the video and what you would like to see in the next videos. Remembering that we have other videos in this style that you will like to watch, just enter our channel that guarantee you will like. Until the next video.